So let's just go to, when did you first go to Russia and when did you start working there?
I started working in Russia, which was the first time I ever went there, in September of 1970.
Of 1970. And who sent you in 1970?
Yeah, in June of 1970, I was graduated from law school and business school at Stanford.
Okay.
And, did real well. I was number 4 in my class at law school, an officer on the law review, and about the same kind of stuff in the business school. So I could get a job anywhere. And I interviewed and interviewed, and I interviewed investment banks, law firms, corporations, and nothing really seemed to ring a bell. I mean, just in a law firm, I'd be in a library for the next 3 years doing research memoranda for senior associates. In a corporation, I interviewed IBM, and they already had the next 20, 30 years of my life all charted out. They said, we'll start you at Armonk, and you'll be here around 3 years, and then we'll move you out to one of our domestic subsidiaries. If you're lucky, you'll go to San Jose, and you'll serve there for a few years. And then, since you have an international interest, we'll probably move you out to one of our foreign subsidiaries. If you're lucky, maybe we'll put you in our French subsidiary. And and we have a defined benefit pension program, and we have health care after you retire and before you retire, all of that stuff. And a competitive salary, they were willing to meet law firms' salaries, which were $18,000 a year in those days.
Exorbitant amounts, yes.
Exorbitant amount. Well, it was thought to be an exorbitant.
I know, yeah.
And but no, I mean, all I had to do was just put my hook in a cog at IBM, and I'd be spit out 30, 40 years later with a nice pension and health care, and I don't know, some other things that would make it easier in my dotage. But so I decided that wasn't for me. So I got together with one of my classmates, a fellow named Carl Longley. I can give you these names later if there are any. And we got together with a guy named Jim Giffen. You may have heard about him.
Yeah, I remember that name.
Yes, he was the guy who had an FCPA prosecution against him. And
okay.
His defense was, I was working for the CIA. Well, he, I mean, even though he was a source, and the CIA people come and visit him periodically, usually pretty low-ranking people who aren't smart. That's really a crappy job in the intelligence community, having to interview businessmen. I mean, that doesn't require much of anything. So you don't have the best and the brightest, such as there is in the intelligence community. But all right. But anyway, that was his defense. He was acquitted, and I guess
that was much later, right? Wasn't?
Yeah, that was in about 10 years ago.
Did you meet him at school in university?
I was introduced to him by my finance professor, James McDonald, who passed away a few years ago. And then Jim had a couple of guys he knew in the New York area. He's a California boy, UCLA law grad, born in, where the hell was he born? Somewhere in Los Angeles or in that area. So he's a California boy, but he was living in New York at the time. And he was working for a company called Satra Corporation. Satra is the way you spell it. Era Ostamil was the head of Satra, founder of it.
Okay.
He was an Armenian Turk who whose father was in the chromium ore business. So Turkey and the Soviet Union made chromium ore.
Okay.
And there's a big deposit of it that in Turkey and in the western area of the Soviet Union, and some in the Caucasian republics.
Okay.
So he so he was making an okay living at it. He moved to New York and continued his father's business from New York rather than Istanbul. And nothing much going on. Then in 1965, the United Nations imposed a blockade on Rhodesia.
Ah.
Rhodesia, up until that time, was the world's largest source of chromium ore.
Okay.
People Era Ostamil would deal in Rhodesian ore, but he found that he could get it a little bit cheaper from the Soviets, who were trying to penetrate the and be competitive with penetrate the market and be competitive with Rhodesian chrome. So all of a sudden, the price of chrome quintupled. Meanwhile, Era had contracts. Multi-year contracts with the Sovs for chrome. So he was minting money hand over fist. And then he hired this kid Giffen, who was, he was in his early 20s at the time. Nice boy, and Giffen talked to me. He said, "Look, Era, you have all this money, and you're specializing now in Soviet chromium ore. Why don't we step out a bit and expand things? And why don't we get into general international consulting and trade? General international. So, but probably with developing countries. The Turkeys of the world, the African countries of the world, the South Americas, those kinds of places." Right. And the Sovs, yeah, sure, you have a good contact there in the chromium ore trading company, which was Soyuz Promexport at the time, and so Era said fine. And Jim said, "Okay, I'd like to hire a few guys to help me." He said, fine. Era said, fine. Said, I'd like to interview them first before you actually hire them. Although, vet them, you vet them, and I'm the last step. And so, Giffen went to McDonald. I think maybe he grew up with him in whatever town in California. Anyway, he went to McDonald among other people, and he said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing, and do you have any people who are really interested in international work?" And he said, "Well, gee, I have two guys in the law business program who have been talking with me about international work and where they can get into it and without having to spend time on low-level work at law firms and corporations and consulting companies." And so, fine, we were introduced, Longley and I. Went to Giffen liked us, and so he asked us to come to New York, which we did, and met Ostamil, and he said fine. And so Giffen said, "I'll meet the salary of whatever law firm or business firm you're thinking about joining." I said, "Well, Jim, after all of what I've been doing, interviewing, I think I'm down to, if I go to a law firm, it's going to be the Cleary Gottlieb firm, which was at that time the most international firm on Wall Street. Cleary Gottlieb was right next to Cravath and Sullivan and Cromwell as being the leading law firms in New York. So Jim said, well, okay, look, I'll do two things for you. One, I'll start you out at whatever Cleary is. And I said, well, it's 18K. He says, yeah, okay, we'll pay 18K. And also need a pretty good bonus if I do well. And so let's set up some metrics that will track whether I'm doing well or not, and whether I deserve a bonus, how much of a bonus, all that kind of thing. So we did that. And
up to then, you didn't have any special interest in Russia. You didn't have any Russian language.
The only thing I did is in my freshman and sophomore years at the University of Washington, I was required to take a foreign language. And if you remember, this is 1962, 63. If you remember, this was, the Soviets had sent up all the Sputniks. They
Right.
People in space, and the movie "The Russians Are Coming" had been released, and so I thought, gee, if these guys are going to come over here and take us over, it might be useful to speak their language.
Uh-huh.
And so I took Russian at the University of Washington in my freshman and sophomore years.
Okay.
Other than that, the only other contact with Russia remotely was I took Leon Lipson's course in Soviet law at Stanford Law School.
Okay.
I got an A plus in it.
All right.
Yeah,
But
A plus was good in Stanford Law School in those days. So.
yeah. So you were hired to be a lawyer or a trader?
I was hired to be a consultant, a legal and financial and business consultant.
Okay. And you were completely inexperienced at this, but you had an education in business and law, right?
And Giffen was. I mean, we were all kids. And just by luck, one of the guys who joined us was Paul Prail, who at that time was a vice chancellor of the University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA, for external relations, i.e. fundraising.
Okay.
So most of the chief executives in California and many in the rest of the United States. And he happened to sit next to a guy on a plane, a guy named Zenon Hansen. Zenon Hansen at that time was the chief executive of the Mack Truck Company in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And during that period, the Soviets were negotiating with Henry Ford to build a big truck plant, the Kamaz plant. And finally, Ford chickened out. He just didn't want to push the limits of the envelope in Washington. Nixon and Kissinger weren't quite ready to go to Moscow yet. They were planning it, but they didn't want to. They wanted to maintain a hostile attitude toward the Soviets until that was part of their strategy. Anyway. So Hansen, I can do this. My God, I've put in truck plants before around the world. Yeah, but I don't know anybody in Russia. And so, well, I don't know. We have one of the biggest U.S. traders in our company, Era Ostamil, who does hundreds of millions of dollars worth of chromium ore a year with them, and he's the largest thing in the U.S. Soviet commercial experience, right? So Hansen said, fine. He said, okay, first thing is, let's go to Moscow and meet the guys. And so we set up meetings in Moscow, went to Moscow, met the guys, and it was a very positive meeting. And we invited the guys to then visit Hansen and and the U.S. And meanwhile, Hansen said, "Gee, it's going pretty well. Why don't we set up a project office in Moscow?"
Uh-huh.
And we rented rooms 425, 427, 429, and 432 in the Metropole Hotel, fourth floor.
Wow.
And right on the front, and turned them into offices. Just had them take the beds and furniture, and we got office furniture scrounged around from various sources. So we opened that office towards the end of 1970, and I spent more time in that office in the next few years than did Longley, who was very, very rarely there, Giffen, Ostermill, or really anybody else at Satra.
Uh-huh.
I had identified, I said, what do I have that these guys don't? Well, at least I have a little bit of Russian language that I can then, if people will tolerate me, I can do like Arm & Hammer did. I'll learn 5 words a day.
Yeah.
And then be exposed to it. So I'll go to Russian parties. I'll accept invitations to socialize. I'll do this kind of stuff. And so I spent most of 1970, 1971, 1972, a little bit of 1973 in Moscow.
And in those years, were there other expats there?
A few.
Yeah.
But mostly the Ostemills of the world. That is, the trading types. Some had made some money, like Ostermill, some hadn't. And they were all sort of crazy kinds of characters. There were real characters involved, because it wasn't the thing to do in those days.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking at doing the thing to do. I was looking at a way to have some fun, get some experience, do some interesting things. And so fast forward in June of 1971, the Russians came to the United States. Giffen invited Pearson. What was his first name? James?
Who, the Canadian?
No, Pearson. He was the foreign reporter for Business Week at the time.
Oh, okay. No idea.
I forget the first name. Anyway, so Pearson attached himself to embedded himself in our delegation, and with the MAC delegation and with the Soviet delegation. And he attended all the meetings and everything. Zenin said, "Fine, just let me know what you're going to print before you print it. I don't want you to, you're under a code of silence,
Right.
an NDA." So we signed an agreement at the end of that visit that envisioned the design and construction of the KAMAZ plant in Naberezhny Chelny, Greenfields facility in Tatarstan on the banks of the Kama River. Wow. And Pearson put it on the front page of Business Week under the banner headline, "The $1 billion truck project with the Russians." Wow.
Whoa.
Dollars was $1 billion. And so all of a sudden, things were beginning to thaw a bit in Washington. You could feel it.
Yeah.
And of course, in 1972, Nixon and Kissinger went to China. They went to Russia. They signed all the commercial agreements with Russia, and the era of détente bloomed. And our phones lit up. They'd been lighting up ever since the Mac deal, but they lit up, and there was no way we could handle all the business. It was just, it was bedlam. I mean, we were, sometimes I'd be on 4 phone conversations at once, just putting one on hold, the other. And, but it worked. it really worked. We made good money and we did good things. And I was serving both as a lawyer on putting the deal documents together. Nobody else knew anything about how to put agreements together with Russians. And I didn't, but I taught myself. So we we did real well.
Yeah.
Giffen, I got together with Jeeb Halaby. And Jeeb, as you remember, was Kennedy's head of the, what was it, the FAA or anyway, aviation. He was the aviation. Jeeb Halaby. He's a big guy in aviation at the time. I forget what airline he was with, but so Giffen and Halaby were involved in trying to get some financial backers to buy the consulting part of Satra Corporation from Ostamil. But they didn't tell Ostamil. They wanted to have everything all set up. And, in this world, leaks. You can't keep anything secret.
Right.
Ostamil heard about it from third parties, called Giffen into his office, and they had a knockdown drag-out, the result of which is Ostamil fired Giffen.
Wow.
And following that, Giffen, who had a good relationship with Bill Verity, the chief executive of Armco Steel. Armco was bought by some other steel company, I forget which. But so when Giffen was fired, Verity said, well, come on over and join me. And you can do this general international stuff with a Soviet orientation, because Armco was real interested in doing steel in Russia. And so Giffen went over to Armco and formed Armco International, of which he was president, wholly subsidiary of Armco Steel. And meanwhile, the conditions at Satra for myself, because I was identified as a Giffen guy.
That's what I was going to ask you. You're part of the offending guy here. Yeah.
They really went south.
Yeah.
And I thought, there isn't much of a future here for me.
Yeah.
I spoke with Ostamil about it very openly. He said, well, John, you have to prove yourself to me. Right now it's a question mark.
Yeah.
God bless him. He was open, not like guys who would put a shiv in your back if you turned away. So I began to be open to inquiries, and in 1973. One of my clients, Roy Ash, was running for Treasury Secretary. The president said, well, why don't you come in and become assistant to the president in the White House and take over the newly named Office of Management and Budget. And Roy was a big management guy, chief executive of Litton, and he had a sterling career at Litton, and great thing. Litton was one of the first real conglomerates.
Yeah, vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Litton, Teledyne, and Textron were the three big conglomerates in the early 70s and late 60s. So then Roy started casting around for people to join him, and he remembered me, he remembered Russia. When Bill Simon was appointed Treasury Secretary rather than Roy. Roy stayed around for a few months, and so he left. And
Wow.
and
You had moved out of Moscow. You were back. You were in D.C.
yeah.
You were what, 26, 27, something?
Geez, let's see, 19. No, I was 29.
29. Okay.
28 when I got that job. Yeah, almost 29. And so I began. I was sort of a smart guy, hardworking guy without portfolio.
Right.
So I got involved in all kinds of things. So my technically my portfolio was national security and international affairs, but defense is such a huge thing that I was pretty much involved in the intelligence and State Department things, and a little bit of the international activities of commerce, a few things with defense like foreign arms sales, foreign arms sales to Iran. I began being more open to alternatives on the outside. I'd been introduced to Sam Pisar, a lawyer in Paris. And in 1974, he invited my wife at the time, Vivian, and myself to visit him at his chateau in the valley of the Loire. Chateau was right down the road from Giscard d'Estaing's chateau, who, of course, he had much more money than Pisar, but he was finance minister at the time. Then, of course, elected president of France, and now he's dead. But and Sam and I got along pretty well. And so we kept in touch, and periodically he'd call. He said, "Well, how things going? Jesus, not sure. Is it really what you wanted it to be, and where you have a future? Do you think?" I said, I just don't think the president's going to be reelected.
Yeah.
And maybe I should beat the rush. So in 1976, maybe it's early mid 76, I resigned, got together with Pisar. We've formed offices in New York and Washington that I headed. We called the firm Pisar Huhs, and the office in Paris was called Cabinet Pisar, because I'm not admitted to practice in France, so I couldn't.
And so this was consulting or legal work?
Legal
work. Okay.
Sam was a lawyer, has an SJD from Harvard, and wrote a seminal book on legal relations between East and West called Coexistence and Commerce. And so Sam and I got along pretty well. He invited me to all kinds of family affairs. And there I met his stepson, who's now Secretary of State of the United States, Antony Blinken.
Whoa.
Yeah, Anthony. He was just a beginning teenager at the time, but a precocious guy. I was very impressed with Anthony. He's a precocious guy. He was going to school in Paris, and then his father, Don Blinken, is a partner in Warburg, something, a Jewish investment banking firm, a top drawer firm.
Yeah.
And also a philanthropist, made himself piles of money, served for 20 years in a philanthropy position as chairman of the State University of New York. And so we'd very often get together in family functions like that. And whereas my contacts with Anthony were not all that substantive, I was impressed with the guy, but my real business with Sam.
Right.
Sam and I practiced law together until 1985.
Uh-huh.
And so from 10 years, we practiced law together. And we handled a lot of Soviet matters, a lot of Soviet matters.
Well, what kind of, I mean, I don't, you don't, what kind of, was all trade?
Opening a McDonald's restaurant in Moscow, where we ran up against Victor Grecian, who was at that time party boss of Moscow. And after we had been years negotiating this thing, he put the kibosh on it, saying, "No, this isn't my view of how Moscow should look." The arches and all that. He didn't buy the glitz. He was a old line Soviet conservative. Others, Revlon, for selling cosmetics, producing them there. Seagram, where my real client was Edgar Bronfman Jr. Edgar Bronfman Sr., excuse me, who was chief executive at the time of Seagram, and he was importing Russian wines and spirits, wanted to import more. Particularly, he wanted to get the Stolichnaya distribution for the United States away from Pepsi and Monsieur Henry. So anyway, and then a number of machinery companies for selling parts to the Kamaz project, which was still going on. Ultimately, the Mac and the Soviets parted ways, and the Sovs did it pretty much themselves after getting whatever they wanted from Mac, which was fine. And they opened a purchasing commission in Paris to buy the block machining line, the forge line, the stamping line, the paint shop. It was entirely fully automated. I mean, fully integrated. So they did everything there, because in Soviet times you couldn't afford, you couldn't rely on your suppliers to give you high quality stuff on time. So they did it all there. Wow. And so I represented a lot of machinery companies selling things to the Kamaz project.
And they were paid in hard currency. And this was money from sale of natural gas to Europe?
I don't think they had the gas lines in at that time. Lines that were just being constructed in the early 70s. And maybe a few gas lines, because I represented Cameron Iron Works, which was a manufacturer of ball valves for gas pipelines. These pipelines were 60 inches, 5 feet tall, huge things. And the ball valves were really huge also. So I guess what we did, so we did some, on the gas line too, we did some deals. So it was very good. We made good money. I was making more money than probably I would have at a New York law firm. I'm not. And then as Sam got older, he was a concentration camp survivor. He wrote a book about it called La Sang de l'Espoir in French, Of Blood and Hope in English, about his experiences being born in Białystok, Poland in 1938, at age 12 being deported by the Nazis to Auschwitz, where his mother and small sister were sent to the left and he was sent to the right, ultimately to survive. But the reason he was a survivor is because he was able to focus. You only get one chance, one mistake in a camp, and you're dead. You had to make sure you didn't make one mistake. And that really gave Sam a good focus that enabled him to do things early in his career and in his life. But as he got older, he became, how would you say, the relationship between him and me frayed because we fought about too many small things, inconsequential things. Sam could never make a mistake. And I just got tired of backing up and giving up on small things. So
Right.
some draw a line, or he'd draw a line. Oh, we'd go on for months talking about $100 or something. It was really ridiculous. So we both agreed that, yeah, okay, I'll go do something else. And he was at that time thinking about retiring, and ultimately he did in 1990. Closed his office in Paris. 92. When he and I broke up, we closed our offices in the States. And at that time, I got together with the LeBoeuf Lamb firm, law firm in New York, and to help form a international practice for them, with Russia practice, or Soviet practice, being one of the first elements of it. And in 1990, I established the first office for LeBoeuf Lamb in Moscow.
Okay. And you were one of the first in that period then, right?
Couder preceded us by about a year.
Yeah.
So Couder was accredited by UPDK first. Then a firm that doesn't exist anymore, was it Sarah Carey, I think her
Sarah
name.
Carey, yeah, she was with Arnold and Porter.
No, before that, she was with some other firm. I forget the name. Anyway, that firm was Arnold and Porter was never accredited.
So Sarah Carey did the joint venture agreement for the first joint venture that I worked for in like 1991 or 1992.
Yeah, that could be. She had some good clients. She had a good gift of gab.
Yeah, yeah.
And was able to say, and she had an instinct for the juggler. You could see her in a reception. She came into a reception already knowing which people she wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
You look around the room, spot a person, go and say whatever she had previously thought of saying to them. Give them a card, leave a follow-up, get a card from them, go on to the next one, go on. Oh, she was very good business developer.
Yeah, yeah.
We were accredited in 1990 or 1991, although we set up our office before being accredited. And we had a relationship with Oko Bank, the Finnish bank, at that UPDK building on, what is it? Dobryninskaya, at Dobryninskaya. Yeah, big UPDK building there. And so Oko Bank had some extra space. They wanted to lay off. We needed some space, so we we set up an office there. I hired the husband of the head of the political section of the U.S. Embassy, a guy named Jim Mandel. His wife, Judith Mandel, was head of the political section. He was a lawyer by trade, and he excellent Russian, and a good Russian education, much more than I ever had. Not in Russia, but at U.S. universities. U.S. universities he attended, and so he became the first head of our Moscow office. And then we began hiring people, and then in 1991, the IMF engaged us to help them set up in Moscow, and we negotiated space for them in the SEV building. You know, that big thing that looks like a book that is located across from the White House.
I know that building very well. Yes, I know that. I used to know my first translator's former wife ran the restaurant there. And so we used to go and hang out, and it was a place where you had to have a Russian passport, but I could get in. So, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, through representing the IMF and dealing with the management of the SEV building,
Right.
We became acquainted with them. And at that time, remember, the wall came down in '89,
Right.
and then disintegrated. And so they moved everybody out, and then they began picking and choosing who would come in, like the IMF and some other people. And I said, gee, you don't have a law firm in there yet. You need a law firm. And so we began negotiating, and end of '92, beginning of '93, but we needed some new space by that. So we rented a wing of the SEV building, you know, the open book. So
Right.
the wing was ours.
Okay.
And sublet part of that because we didn't need it all. And ultimately we did, but you know, we just sublet it on a short-term basis to
Right.
cover some of the rental. And so we moved into the SEV building in '93.
And you were living in Moscow by then?
I was living in both places. Always had a place in New York.
Oh, okay. Okay.
78, I bought a place on East 74th Street, and, right around Park Avenue. And I had a duplex penthouse right in the midst of the fiscal crisis that I ultimately sold once Renee and I were married for, I don't know, 10, 15 times what I paid for it, something like that.
Yeah.
It was just one of those.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're in the right place, at the right time. So we moved into the SEV building. I pretty much always, or most times, not always in the '80s, but in the '70s, I generally lived in the Hotel Nacional, and particularly in the Lenin Suite. That was my favorite.
Uh-huh.
And I knew all the administrators there. And if I were just coming back in a week or so, leaving and coming back, I'd pay for extra nights, or sometimes they even eat a few rent-free nights to keep me around. And so and sometimes they had a higher-ranking guy than I. So sometimes I was kicked out and I'd have to move to another room. 439 was my next favorite. It was a big London suite, but about twice the size. But I don't know. I like London suite was preserved in the exactly the way it was when Vladimir Ilyich lived there. And so 439 wasn't.
Yeah.
It was really nice. And then in the 90s and in the 2000s, up until 2012, I had apartments in Moscow.
Uh-huh.
I lived for a while in Kotelnitskaya Nabережная. That's the artsy craftsy place, that Stalin wedding cake building where Plisetskaya lived, and all that kind of she stuff. And
Right.
so for a while, I lived down near Kievsky Vokzal for a while. There's a nice apartment complex down there. Rostovskaya Nabережная. Ultimately, I got the place I really liked, which was just walking distance from the office, and that was at Pushkinskaya Ploshchad, just walking distance from Gazetsky. What are the uluk?
Gvozdy.
Nikitsky, they called it, but it was Ulitsa Belinskova before it was Nikitsky Pereulok.
Oh, okay.
When we first moved there, it was Ulitsa Belinskova.
Yeah.
So I just walked just a few hundred meters down from Pushkinskaya. So I'd walk to the office unless it was really crappy weather out.
Yeah.
I already knew legal Russian pretty well from my time with Satra and Sam, but so I learned a lot of my interpersonal Russian from them. Oh, I remember in 1993, in the siege of the White House, I was living in right near Kievsky Vokzal, and I walked over and watched the siege because they take our offices.
Yeah. It
So,
was right. Yeah, that was right next to your office then, right? It's the SEB building. Yeah.
well, not next to it, in it. I mean,
Yeah.
and they really trashed our place. They took
right.
they took all our petty cash. They took all of our computers and whatever, and then they set it on fire, and then the firemen doused it with water. Oh, what a mess! What a mess!
Yeah. Yeah.
It was unlivable. So we couldn't live there, and we moved into a domic owned by Earl Worsham of the Worsham Group. He owned these small domics around. He did a lot of real estate in Moscow.
Right.
Things like that, I think. But
well, let me ask you. I want to go back to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So, what's your recollection? Did you see that coming? Did it change things dramatically for you? How did you feel at the time while that was going on?
Well, at the beginning of December 1991, it was in the cards, obviously. They had that Minsk meeting. They created this SNG, and it was so it was only a matter of time, I felt. But before then, with the putsch in August of 1991, and then with Gorbachev being rescued by Yeltsin, being flown back to Moscow on a plane organized by Yeltsin, being then at a joint news conference where Gorbachev was really short, and Boris Nikolaevich was very tall, and like Mutt and Jeff. And, Boris Nikolaevich, he treated Mikhail Sergeyevich like sort of his pet, or say, it would look like he was really talking down to him and sort of patting him on the head, and I'll make it all right. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And so I saw that, and I just thought, no, it's not going to last.
Right.
So that was about 3 months in advance, I'd say, that I came to that sort of a firm conclusion. So I began briefing our clients and preparing for whatever needed to be.
And did you think that it was impending disaster for you and your clients, or did you think that it was a period of wait and see? Well, I mean, how would you looking at it in terms of the business outlook?
From a business outlook, I thought probably if the whole thing fell apart, we were still in the Russian Federation, which was the biggest and strongest and most industrially advanced part of the Soviet Union. So I thought, shit happens. So well, we'll just live with it. We'll roll with the punches. And all of our clients, of course, had all kinds of questions, asking us research on this, research on that. The law firm was busy at 150% of capacity there in Moscow, trying to handle all that, and we really couldn't hardly, because who knew what was it? Gorbachev himself didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
So, and finally, the real key to it came in early December. Early December of 1991, when a friend of mine, a Russian friend of mine, was appointed defense minister of the Russian Federation. And we visited his office, Mandel and I, someday in December, I can't remember. And his office, the defense ministry of the Russian Federation, consisted of Kokoshin, Kokoshin, and Kokoshin. One guy in one office with a Russian flag and a Soviet flag outside, and with a, I don't know, one or two militiamen standing guard there.
Yeah.
Kokoshin welcomed us in, and I said, well, you know, Andrei, you're getting ready for your move down to Frunze, which is Soviet Defense Ministry. He said, well, I don't know. It's maybe, you know, and don't you tell anybody you've been talking with me about it. Nobody. No. There's so much rumor going on, rumors flying here and there and everything. So I said, Andrei, good luck. And thanks for seeing us. And I just ran into Andrei, I don't know, a few years ago on a plane to Moscow. We had a nice talk. Yeah, he's doing a lot of interesting things.
Huh.
But he never did become defense minister of the RF after Soyuz Raspался. They combined the two, and there was only the two defense ministries, and there was only one chair and two ministers. And
Yeah.
that fight, Kokoshin lost. So, so I just looked at it as, you know, just another problem to solve.
Just another problem to solve.
There were all kinds of problems to solve in those days. You know, beginning with 97, the things were changing at warp speed in the
Right.
Soviet. And so we were constantly trying to keep up with things. And, you know, we just said another thing's going to happen. Probably the RF will split off. Maybe this SNGL will come to something, which it never did. But
Right.
so we'll do that. And so in January of 1990, you know, it was December 25th, 1991.
Right.
That voted to annul the Союзный договор, and the Russian Federation then bloomed. The Soviet Union disintegrated.
Right.
So we were just booked with work, more work than we knew what to do with. Our clients didn't want to give up what they'd been doing.
Right.
We were doing some interesting things. Pratt Whitney, for example, they were putting in a jet engine factory out in Perm. For the Russian equivalent of the JT-9D, and so it and Boeing, we were representing the Boeing Company there, and they wanted to know what was going on, and it was really.
Boeing had a design bureau there, right? Didn't they?
I set it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
With Luxoft, and what became Luxoft, but it was.
What we did is we set up the Boeing Technical Research Center in the McDonald's building in 91.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that. And the first head of it, Mike, married my office manager, Laura Bernier. So, I mean, we're real close to Mike, and you know, we did a lot of stuff for him, and he was just one block up from us. You know, our office in Moscow, Nikitsky Peruluk, was just one block from the McDonald's building.
Yeah. So, but most of your clients were Western companies and institutes.
That began to change in the second half of the 90s, first half of the 2000s.
Okay. But at that 91, 92, it was foreign companies who were there doing business.
And some Russian companies doing business overseas and in the, for example, the Foreign Trade Organization, Electronorgtechnica. We represented Nintendo to sell them or to license to them, or license Nintendo to use the Russian video game Tetris.
Ah.
And Nintendo really wanted it for not only its Nintendo Entertainment System and its other systems, but also for something new they were bringing out, a handheld game called Game Boy. And they loaded a Tetris cartridge with every Game Boy they sold, and it was phenomenally popular. Gee, within a year, I think sales were 50 million or something like that, individual units. And so this was a big deal for Nintendo, and Nintendo didn't, from our dealing with Electronorgtechnica, which had the rights to it, the Nintendo folks realized that the Russians weren't handling their intellectual property very well. So Nintendo didn't want the Russians to Tetris.
Uh-huh.
So what they did is they convinced the Russians to engage us, me, to negotiate any licenses or anything to do with Tetris. Electronorgtechnica had to use us for it.
Uh-huh.
Nintendo would pay for it out of Electronorgtechnica royalties from Tetris.
Right.
Our check came from Nintendo. We didn't have to wait, and we became pretty good friends with the Electronorgtechnica people.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, they established an office in Bellevue, Washington, that I helped them establish in 1990. What was that? I guess it was 1991. Yeah, it was under Soyuz. Yeah, but everything was falling apart then. You could see it. Even the foreign trade organizations were screwing around and spending their money like it really was theirs. And
yeah. Well, so when the Soviet Union comes apart and the Russian government's sort of now figuring out where to go, did you have any relationship with the Russian government? Did they come to you and say, help us with, figuring out our foreign relations legislation or our business legislation? Or did they approach you?
No.
Yeah.
We knew a lot of officials. And for example, I was able to introduce a lot of clients to Yegor Gaidar. And but he didn't give us any work to do for him because he'd have to pay us. We weren't going to do it for free, and the U.S. government wasn't looking to us. They were looking to the accounting firms to do the kind of work that that the U.S. government wanted done. And the Russians said, I don't know whether we need this stuff or not, but as long as it's free,
yeah,
fine, let's see if there's anything in it.
yeah.
So we did have a lot of contact with the Russian government at all levels, with Boris Nikolaevich, with, just a minute, privatization. I haven't.
Chubais, Fedorov.
Chubais, yes, Chubais,
Right.
yes, a lot of contact with Chubais. And we, in the early 1990s, we introduced a lot of American lawyers, businessmen, whatever, to Chubais. Now, one other thing I'll mention, which may or may not be relevant, is that in 1985, I was the only guy in the United States, practically, putting on Soviet programs for the American Bar Association.
Okay.
And I'd usually do one a year. Oh, excellent publicity. It was worth the work. The publicity was, so I do probably one a year. And in 1985, I got together with the American Bar Association and some other lawyers, and we contacted the Soves I contacted the Soves really, and we decided to form a lawyers group between the American Bar Association and the Association of Soviet Lawyers.
Uh-huh.
It was an informal group. I don't think we didn't have we didn't have a name for it, I don't think, other than it's the joint working group, or I don't know,
Yeah.
several things. And that was a big part of the legal relationship between the US and Soviet Union from 1985 until 1995. After 1995, it sort of tailed off. I lost contact with it. The other guy who was helping me organize it, San Francisco attorney, he had other things to do also, and he was getting older, and you can only do so many things as you get older. So I found it.
Right.
And so that may or may not be relevant to what you're talking about. We did a few things, like we sponsored a project on Russian securities law, and
In 85?
no, this was 91.
Yeah.
That 90, maybe it could have been 90. Because they were just coming out with securities and securities laws and stock companies and all of that. They needed a regulatory framework, they thought. And so I and a couple of guys from the Cleary Gottlieb firm, good guys, I mean, really, they really bore the laboring oar. I'm not a securities lawyer. I sort of brought the Russian part of it with me. They brought the US part. And we did some wonderful work for the Russians on suggesting securities legislation, even drafting it, not completely, but in draft form to see what they thought about it. And then the Russians sort of began to break off the contact or not follow up on contacts. And lo and behold, they came up with their own securities legislation, which borrowed a few things from us, but was a typically Russian invention. A lot of Russian things that Americans would have never thought about being relevant to securities regulation. So, we never did much in representing any of the accounting firms in the accounting engagements with the various Russian agencies. A lot of that was handled by the World Bank, and the U.S. part of it. A lot of that sometimes went through the World Bank. The World Bank funded it. The U.S. So U.S. money goes into the World Bank, and it goes to the door. And then there were some U.S. funded projects. And then there was this stock fund that invested in a U.S. government stock fund. I forget the name of it now.
The TUSRIF, was that it?
What?
TUSRIF, TUSRIF. It was the U.S.
Russia Investment Fund. Yeah. Okay. That sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have much to do with it. That was done by somebody else.
Did you have anything to do with HIID and Harvard? Their whole private. They worked with Chubais, I know, and Gaidar on the loans for shares. Yeah,
not early on, but in the year 2000 or 2001, I became the outside general counsel of the Harvard group that was put together to as a result of Allison's work in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Graham, he said, well, Harvard doesn't want to do this anymore, but we're doing great stuff. Why don't we put together a private organization? And so they put together the IEA, the International Economic Association. Yeah, IEA. And they hired, handle all the staff work for them, and they gave him a title of director.
So you weren't, and in terms of, you were sort of part of the large corporate expansion in Russia in that period in the 90s. Facilitating it.
We had a few small clients, but small companies couldn't afford our fees.
Yeah, yeah.
And want to be able to afford our fees.
Yeah.
And we were expensive.
Yeah.
Not as expensive as some others, but and we did good work.
Yeah.
And we were expanding as fast as we could. We never
How
had.
big an office did you have?
At its height, not in the 90s, but in the 2000s, we had 150 people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's going. What happened in 2012? Previously, LeBoeuf Lam had merged with Dewey Ballantyne to form Dewey and LeBoeuf. And trouble is, LeBoeuf Lam was debt-free and very expense conscious. Dewey Ballantyne wasn't expense conscious. And the LeBoeuf Lam management, new management, younger generation, took over, and they ran the firm into bankruptcy in a period of 12 years. The merger with Dewey Ballantyne was in September 2007.
Okay.
I retired from firm management formally in December 31, 2006. And then, but I was on as I stayed on as of counsel, and so I could do as much or as little work as I wanted. Ended up being that people were still asking me to do work. I needed the firm's help. I needed to use the office over there. I knew everybody, and the firm needed me because I'd also helped form their international department. And so I knew where all the skeletons were buried. We had 23 offices worldwide in 2012.
Wow.
And, I mean, 23 overseas, plus some domestic. So we were, so they kept me on.
Well, looking back, when you're saying, looking what you thought in the 90s about how Russia was going to turn out as a market, as a opportunity, has it turned out to be as you would have expected in those days? Do you know what I'm saying about that?
It has, but the bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Russia, of course, has not been good.
No, of course, right.
Since the Ukraine thing and all that, just hasn't been good. And if the bilateral relationship had continued past, say, 2005, like it was from 2000 to 2005,
right?
It would have, they would have hit the ball out of the park, I think. Without the sanctions have really put a damper on U.S. companies doing business there, and particularly now with the cancel culture, chief executives are afraid of their shadows.
Yeah.
They don't want a Twitter mob burning crosses outside their homes.
Right.
Doing Russia, and Russia isn't a friend of the LGBTQ pluses, and they're not a friend of these and that, and, so if not for that, it would have. So they were really setting the world on fire, and so were we, until the crisis of, just a minute, it was 1997, 98.
1998 was the default, right? The devaluation.
Yeah, and that we really did well. They devalued the currency, and we were still in Nikitsky Pereulok, and in the same bank, the same building was our bank. What was it then? It was French bank. What the hell was it? It was Credit.
Credit Lyonnais or
Yeah.
Lyonnais, yeah?
No, it wasn't Lyonnais. It was Credit something or other. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is where I can find it. And they were in the same building. We kept our accounts with them. And when the ruble was devalued, I called the head of the branch. I had $1 million in rubles sitting up there. You know what that asshole Chubais did? He knew that devaluation was coming. And so on Friday, remember the devaluation was on Sunday. On Friday, he paid $1 million that his privatization ministry owed us for fees. We were really big in what we did. I didn't add that, but in order to get some of that World Bank business, we hired one of the World Bank people who happened to be a lawyer to work with us, Barbara Evans, and she landed a bunch of World Bank projects with the privatization ministry. So the way it was paid, World Bank would transfer the money to Chubais. Chubais would transfer the money to us in rubles.
Yeah.
And he paid everything, millions, on Friday. So we were sitting with all these millions, and the bastard then devalues the currency on Sunday. So first thing Monday morning, I was on with the bank, and they said, our internal exchange rate hasn't been changed yet. If you want, I can change all of your rubles into dollars at Friday's rate. We don't change it. Okay.
Yeah, said, really? What's the decision there?
And to show you what the other Russians were thinking, my office manager, who Tatarka, Tanya Mayantsov, I don't know if you've ever met her. Anyway, great girl. She borrowed enough money to buy a car from me, from the firm. I prepaid some of her expenses, some of her salary, with some of those rubles that I didn't have the French bank take. And she went out and bought a car from the Volkswagen distributorship that still had its pre-devaluation prices, which were a lot better in rubles than the post-devaluation price.
Right.
Borrowed from the family and friends. You know how Russians do.
Right.
So that's what a lot of Russians would buy anything.
Buy anything to get value. Yeah.
Solid. That's like a new car.
Right.
So yeah. Other than that, it just produced a lot of new business for us, because firms were wondering, well, what do we do? Right. Allen and Jones' answer was close their Moscow office a few months later in October, November, something like that.
Who was that they closed it?
Allen and Overy.
Oh, okay.
And after August, it was October, November or something, they closed their Moscow office, only to reopen a little bit later.
Yeah.
And open a couple of years later. But, and a number of other firms did the same thing. Particularly, I think Clifford Chance did it. The English firms did. I don't know what's about an English firm, but they were the ones who were closing.
Right.
And on the other hand, were just book solid. Huh. We was afraid to add people, but I didn't start hiring until I was really sure that we were going to maintain this. But that wasn't until 1999 that I saw that this was going to be. But it was a bonanza for us, and it was for the Russians. It really made an impression on them. Those who kept track of the foreign community.
That stayed. Yeah.
Hey, these guys don't cut and run like the Brits.
Yeah.
They stay with us, and not only that, they help us. They do this, they do that, and make things happen. That's what we do. We make things happen.
Yeah. 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 And did any of your American clients close up?
A few closed. Most just reduced staff.
Yeah.
And we're going to see, how does this play out?
How does it play out? Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, the ones who didn't close, like the Boeing Company, it came back and really expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and then 1999 came along. If you remember the long-term credit crisis in the Far East, and there was a real meltdown, and the U.S. devalued the dollar, and there was what was the Plaza Hotel agreement. That had more of an effect on our American clients. Nothing on the Russians, that they were
right.
Didn't affect them, but that had more of an effect on our Russian American.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So did you ever have much to do with AmCham, or and if you did or didn't, why?
I was too busy.
Okay.
Busy making money. I didn't do the introductions because they just came over the transom, word of mouth.
Yeah.
We had a business and we knew what to do with. And so and in those days, usually come to work at 9 o'clock, whether I was in New York or Moscow. I leave around 11 or 12. Actually, Moscow sometimes I'd work until 1 and come back the next day and do it again, Saturdays and Sundays too.
Yeah.
It was so much work.
Yeah.
And so I didn't pay much attention to AmCham, except when I hired Johnny Hines away from the Debelvoz firm in the year 2000 to move to Moscow. He's a joiner. He likes to be on boards and stuff like that. He wanted to run for the AmCham board. I said, fine. He was elected, and so during the 2000s we had excellent contacts with AmCham. It was all Johnny's stuff, and
so you were saying about consultants.
Yeah, they were so numerous and trying to network that that we couldn't avoid them. They were all over the place, in restaurants and all over the place. And so we became acquainted with some of them. Some of them would ask to visit us in the office just to see what a real law office looks like in Moscow. And so they'd come over. Usually they'd be invited over by one of my lawyers or staff. And so I'd show them around, this head of the, I actually, technically, I've never been head of our Moscow office. Always had somebody else. So Mandel was first, then Brian Zimbler, and then finally one of my Estonian lawyers has been the head of the Moscow office the last 5 years, Vasilisa Strij, and she's very good. Very good.
Oh, I remember her.
Yeah.
I remember. I'm sure I met her. I remember her name for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I did interact with them. Sometimes if they were doing something interesting and where we might have some synergy, I'd invite them to lunch or dinner, or just come over for a longer, more formal meeting in the office. And in my informal interactions with them, say over dinner or something like that, particularly get them a bottle of red wine, give them a few drinks and let them open up a bit.
Yeah.
Most of them most I mean, they did have a few senior guys who might have known something or might not have known something, but the guys who were staffing this, and there were hordes of them in the various Russian ministries, and they, in my view, they didn't know anything hardly. That the advice they were giving wasn't American advice. I mean, the American system adopted to the realities of Russia, because they didn't know the realities of Russia. Most didn't speak the language. Most didn't know the history. Most had never had a Russian friend. They were just over there, and most were just there for 6 months. So they had a short, or maybe a year. So they had a short timers attitude, and they just were non-serious.
Yeah.
Most of the Russians with whom I spoke had the same opinion. They say, well, let's see what they come up with. They're having their fun, and we're learning a few things, but not much. And we'll see what they come up with. But gee, they ought to try to give us advice adapted to our system.
Right.
And our realities. I mean, well, you know what it was like in 91, 92,
Yeah.
93.
Yeah.
Hyperinflation. Nobody, people had lost all their savings to inflation.
Barter and,
Yeah,
all broken economic ties.
it was really a mess. And then as with the privatization in full swing, all the ins and outs of these companies stealing from each other, and various oligarchs or wannabe oligarchs stealing companies from each other. Some stole from our American clients, like Dart. What was his first name? Of Dart Industries. You remember they did some business over there?
Yeah, vaguely. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a joint venture out somewhere. I didn't handle their particular affairs in our office, but their Russian partner took all of their interest away from them just by changing the share register in the computer and it was $300 and some million that Dart lost. And this was the Dart there was a lot of icky stuff going on, and these guys didn't have a clue as to what was happening.
Yeah.
Because they were rather insular. They most of them associated with each other.
Yeah.
And not very much with Russians. So the Russians would, give them a banquet occasionally, but the
Right.
multi people, and so you just talk to the person next to you, and have your vodka toast. Maybe you get drunk, maybe you don't, but always keep each other at sort of a distance. And so they were, not only were they too young and too inexperienced, but they didn't know enough about Russia to adapt their advice to the realities of Russia at that time. And I'm not saying we knew a lot of the realities. We didn't. We didn't
Right.
live day to day. I mean, like an average Russian who's lost his salary.
Right.
But well, we had situations. Give you a perfect situation. Belov, Yuri Belov. He was trade representative, I think, at the Russian Soviet embassy in Washington for years. And good guy, lawyer by trade, but good guy. And so I involved him in some legal things when he was in Washington. And then he went back to become the equivalent of general counsel of the Ministry of Justice of the Soviet Union. And big, important position. He was the one who really got us accredited. I came to him, I said, Yuri Andreevich, hey, we need to be accredited. He said, of course you do. I'll vouch for you personally. Here, fill out the application and get all your documents and bring them in. I'll make sure it happens in real time. And that's what he did, and we were accredited. And so we were able to, we needed to be accredited to move into the 7th building. They wouldn't let us in there unless we were accredited. So, so that had to happen before then. But here's LeBoeuf, and as I mentioned, there's the Soviet Ministry of Justice and the Russian Ministry of Justice. Two stools combined into one, and LeBoeuf lost that one. And I visited with him. He was a pretty good friend. So he was maybe 10 years older than I, maybe 15. And we visited both in his last days at the Ministry of Justice, as well as his life as a retiree. He was really bitter, really, really bitter. He said, you know, I've done everything all my life what I was told to do.
Yeah.
I was a model Soviet citizen. I was a model diplomat. I was a model Soviet representative in Washington. And
this is what it got him. Yeah.
And now, I have my $100 rubles a month pension, which doesn't amount to anything after inflation.
Right.
So he was real bitter. He was really having a tough time getting along. I said, you know, maybe I could find, you know, something for you. Maybe a big joint venture might need an internal lawyer. Some of them are hiring internal lawyers now. I know some of them talked to me about it. And he said, you know, I'm just not a commercial guy. I'm a bureaucrat. I just couldn't adjust to being with a commercial firm in a Russian firm, or I don't even think in a foreign firm. So I don't know what happened to him. I think he died fairly soon thereafter, but I just didn't.
Yeah.
So so a lot of that kind of tragedy was playing out, and these young fellas and young girls, they had no you'd sort of hear about it, this or that, but nothing real personal, like somebody you've known for
somebody you knew and had
decades.
worked with and respected. Yeah.
So,
And these were consultants that were being paid by OECD or World Bank or
their firms were being paid, I believe, mostly by World Bank, but some by OECD, I guess, and maybe some directly by the U.S. government. I didn't pay much attention. They got their money and they paid these guys their consultants. They paid them a normal consulting salary that they would earn in the States, and I think they gave them I don't recall right now, but I think they gave them a little bit of an uplift for chip pay or something like that.
Right.
By 95, most of them were out of there. It didn't last.
95?
95, as I recall, is it? Or maybe 96, but you know, it pretty much, my recollection is it had dissipated. I never really had much to do with it in the first place. So For my associate, Barbara Evans, who was in that kind of business. And as that petered out, her interest in the firm petered out. Because she was really good at doing World Bank kind of projects with an accounting firm or with the World Bank or with a Soviet ministry. She spoke pretty good Russian, wrote okay Russian. And but as that work sort of petered out, as I recall, and she finally left the firm, 97 maybe. Eight. We did everything we could to keep her. Gee, the chairman of the firm at the time, Sam Sud, with her. I mean, he thought she walked on water.
Right.
And she's a smart girl, real smart, but just no interest in the commercial practice of law, in putting together a stock company, putting together an acquisition, putting together a joint venture. She just not much in that.
Yeah.
And just fine, everybody to everybody.
Right. 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 So, do you have any regrets? Things you wish you had done differently?
Well, I'll tell you what I thought was my biggest success
Okay.
from the formation of our office, 1990, until about the year 2000. We didn't have anybody leave us voluntarily. No turnover.
Wow.
Zero. Nobody.
Zero.
Everybody thought that we had the greatest office in Moscow.
Yeah.
And I really encouraged the use of the Russian language among lawyers in the office, and particularly between America. We didn't have very many Americans, mainly Russians. So between Americans and Russians, including myself, and I used Russian with the staff, except where they were just so much better than I that okay. I mean, let's not struggle. We all have a tough time here.
Right.
So anyway, so that is my one biggest success.
Yeah.
We really had a wonderful organization, and a large one, but then it became a little too large. The 2000s, there was more competition, real competition, and those would just offer our guys much more money than they were getting, because I've always been thrifty, including with myself, and so we didn't pay the highest salaries in Moscow. We paid good salary and even better bonuses. We paid the best bonuses. Always, I was a base salary plus bonus guy. I gave one of my associates $1 million bonus once.
Whoa.
Because he did such a good job for a Russian client that client paid the firm a $2 million bonus with the understanding that we would share half of it with my associate.
Whoa.
Now my
did
associate
a hell of a job, whatever that was.
Yeah, well, really, he did an acquisition for him that the guy didn't think could be done.
Yeah.
And but this is a good example of the kind of people I hired. Oleg Berger was his name. Is his name? He's still alive.
Remember that name?
Yeah. He was working with the Milbank Tweed firm in New York when I hired him in 1994, and son of a Soviet emigre, Jewish, came from Moscow. He took me, anyway, I hired him for the Moscow office, but I also hired him for one specific purpose. He looked, talked, acted, and was in every way as much like a Russian oligarch as any American could be. He loved to go to the saunas at the dachas on the weekend, drink vodka, tell dirty jokes in Russian. His Russian was absolutely fluent, of course. He was born in Moscow, and then they fled. They emigrated with all those Jews coming over in the late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah.
And anyway, so those are the kind of people I hired because they really got along with the Russian clients.
Right.
And you may not be aware, but he was also the guy I staffed on my Yukos Sibneft merger.
Ah, okay.
Did the Yukos Sibneft merger. Oleg was the guy I staffed on it, and we dealt with Khodorkovsky, his general counsel, whose name I forgot, and a couple of other people who were part of the management team along with Khodorkovsky. And and we were still representing him in 2003, October, when Khodorkovsky went out to, I don't know, wherever, one of his plants and one of his facilities in Siberia, and was arrested by
Arrested, yeah.
the KGB out there. Yeah.
Right, right,
Yep.
right, right.
So,
So you adapted to Russian reality.
yeah,
I mean, and it seems that that was the prerequisite for ongoing success.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know of a person who made it there in the long term who didn't really go native.
Yeah.
And I dated all kinds of Russian girls, had all kinds of Russian friends, went
Yeah.
to parties, went to this, that.
Yeah.
And
You became Nash Chilivek.
yeah, well, yes, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I became it. In addition, I was helping the firm build its international practice, which I was traveling all over the world. That was a period of my life that, say, beginning with the year 2000 until 2012, is just a blur.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how I managed to get done as much as I got done in that time. I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
Look at your paper here and see if I underlined some of the things.
Yeah.
Okay. Frequently, yeah. What impact do you think you had on the Russian economy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Nothing measurable.
Nothing measurable. Yeah.
Nothing measurable. It's a big place. So, but I believe that what I did had a positive impact on the Russian economy and on the people who were affected by it.
Okay.
I felt like we were doing good things, not things that would just make money for my client or the Russian Russians or our firm or something, but just, it was all a win-win situation for the most. Some didn't turn out to be that way ultimately, but at least when I did it, assuming that everybody would continue to act in the spirit with which we did the merger or acquisition in the first place, I thought that, hey, this is going to be good. Some didn't.
Yeah.
And why didn't they turn out? People.
Yes,
and usually it was American companies changing people in charge of their project at the head office and cutting the budget, moving people around, whatever, or the Russians doing the same thing. Russians can be as Americans can be Russian.